Roger, Ghost will be fast. Valdez climbed to 3,000 feet and began a wide orbit around the extraction site, her eyes scanning for threats, while her aircraft's sensors painted an increasingly hostile picture. Enemy forces were massing for a coordinated assault on the landing zone, but they were waiting for the helicopter to commit to its approach before revealing their positions. The Seahawk descended toward the LZ, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust and debris that obscured visibility for hundreds of meters in all directions. Valdez could see Kane's team moving through the dust cloud, the SEAL carrying one of the wounded men, while another team member supported the second casualty. Taking fire, taking fire. The helicopter pilot's voice cracked with tension as enemy small arms fire erupted from concealed positions around the landing zone. I count multiple muzzle flashes from the tree line to the south. Valdez immediately rolled into a steep dive, her aircraft arrowing toward the enemy positions despite having no weapons remaining. She activated her afterburners, the twin engines producing a thunderous roar that echoed across the landscape. The sound of a combat aircraft at full power was terrifying to ground troops, a psychological weapon as effective as any bomb or missile. She pulled out of her dive at 500 feet, her Super Hornet screaming across the enemy positions at nearly 700 knots. The sonic boom that followed rattled windows for miles and temporarily disrupted the enemy's coordinated fire. It was a desperate gambit, but it bought the extraction team precious seconds. All personnel on board. Kane's voice carried relief and urgency in equal measure. Warhawk 7-7, we are ready for immediate departure. The Seahawk lifted off in a cloud of dust and debris, its engines straining under the weight of 8 SEALs plus aircrew. Enemy fire erupted again as the helicopter cleared the landing zone, but the aircraft was already accelerating toward the safety of international waters. Ghost, this is Warhawk 7-7. We are clear of the LZ and en route to the ship. Thanks for the cover. Valdez acknowledged with a double click of her radio, too exhausted to form words. Her fuel gauge showed critical levels now, less than 2,000 pounds of aviation gas remaining. At current consumption rates, she had perhaps 8 minutes of flying time before flameout. Ghost, this is Phantom Base. We have a tanker aircraft standing by at coordinates Sierra Sierra 7946. Proceed immediately for aerial refueling. A KC-135 Stratotanker, the aerial equivalent of a gas station. If Valdez could reach the refueling aircraft, she might still make it home. But the tanker was operating in international airspace, 60 miles from her current position. At her, the intercepted transmission crackled through the static at 3:47 hours Zulu time. Phantom Base, this is Razor 7-1. We have eyes on the target. Request immediate air support. Repeat, immediate air support. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, a SEAL team leader whose reputation preceded him into every classified briefing room from Coronado to Langley. What the intelligence analysts at MacDill Air Force Base didn't expect was Kane's next transmission. 15 minutes later, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. Phantom Base, abort the mission. I repeat, abort. This is a goddamn suicide run. But by then, Captain Ezra Ghost, Valdez was already airborne. The pre-dawn sky above the Strait of Hormuz stretched like black velvet, punctured only by the distant glow of oil platform flames on the horizon. Valdez banked her FA-18F Super Hornet through a gentle turn, the aircraft's twin General Electric F414 engines purring at 28,000 feet. Her helmet-mounted display painted the world in green and amber, friendly aircraft appearing as triangular symbols, hostile contacts as diamonds edged in red. The mission briefing had been sparse, almost insultingly so. Extract a high-value target from a compromised position. Provide close air support for a SEAL extraction team. Standard Tuesday morning work, they'd said. Ghost, you copy that last transmission from Razor 7-1. The voice of Major Patricia Reeves, her squadron commander, cut through her headset with unusual tension. Negative, Phantom Base. Radio's been quiet since takeoff. A pause too long. In military aviation, pauses meant problems. Ghost, what's your fuel state? Valdez glanced at her multifunction display, showing 7,000 pounds, still plenty of time on station. Another pause, longer this time. Ghost, be advised, the target location has been upgraded. We're looking at a significant anti-aircraft presence. SA-15s, possibly SA-20s. Intel suggests coordinated radar coverage across the entire AO. Surface-to-air missiles, the kind that turned million-dollar aircraft into expensive fireworks. Valdez felt her jaw tighten, but her voice remained steady. Copy, Phantom Base. Are we still green for the mission? The silence stretched across the radio waves like a held breath. Below her, the waters of the Persian Gulf reflected the first hints of dawn, transforming from black to deep purple. Somewhere down there, American Special Operations Forces were counting on her. The mathematics of warfare were simple. Without air support, good men died. With it, they had a chance. Ghost, you are still green, but understand you're flying into a hornet's nest. The SEALs have requested immediate extraction. This isn't going to be a milk run. Valdez adjusted her grip on the stick, feeling the slight vibration that meant her aircraft was ready for whatever came next. In the distance, she could see the coastline of Iran emerging from the darkness like a jagged wound against the sky. The call sign Ghost hadn't been earned through any dramatic aerial combat. Captain Ezra Valdez had inherited the moniker during her second deployment, after a night reconnaissance mission over Syria where she'd managed to penetrate hostile airspace, photograph 3 high-value targets, and return to base without triggering a single radar system. Like a ghost, her commanding officer had said during the debrief. The name stuck, though not always kindly. In the male-dominated world of naval aviation, some pilots whispered it meant she was invisible because she was forgettable. They were wrong, but Valdez had stopped correcting them years ago. Her Super Hornet sliced through the thin air, each component working in perfect harmony. The APG-79 radar swept the sky ahead, its electronic eye searching for threats. The aircraft itself was a marvel of American engineering, 44,000 pounds of titanium, aluminum and composite materials, capable of pulling 9GS and delivering ordnance with surgical precision. But for all its technological sophistication, the machine was only as good as the person controlling it. Ghost, you're approaching the threat envelope. We're painting multiple search radars, bearing 045 through 080. Recommend you maintain current altitude until further notice. The warning came from an E-2D Hawkeye orbiting 50 miles behind her position, its massive rotodome antenna tracking every electronic emission across hundreds of square miles. Valdez acknowledged with a double click of her radio. A standard procedure when maintaining radio silence was critical. She descended to 18,000 feet, using the aircraft's stealth characteristics to minimize her radar cross-section. The Super Hornet wasn't as invisible as an F-22 or F-35, but properly flown, it could become a ghost on enemy radar screens. Valdez had studied every technical manual, every classified report on electronic warfare tactics. She knew her aircraft's capabilities better than most pilots knew their own cars. The target area lay 30 miles ahead, a coastal facility that intelligence reports described as a research station. Valdez suspected it was something more significant. Research stations didn't warrant SEAL team infiltrations or surface-to-air missile deployments. The Iranians were protecting something valuable, and now American Special Operations Forces were trapped trying to steal it. Her threat warning receiver remained quiet, but Valdez knew that could change in seconds. Modern SAM systems could go from standby to active tracking to missile launch in under 10 seconds. By the time her radar warning receiver screamed its alert, she might already be dead. The radio crackled again. Any station, this is Razor 7-1. We are taking effective fire and require immediate close air support. Grid coordinates follow. Kane's voice carried the controlled urgency of a professional under extreme pressure. 37 Delta Mike Uniform, 4468-7215. Multiple hostiles in concrete structures. Danger close, I repeat, danger close. Danger close. The two words every combat pilot dreaded. It meant friendly forces were so close to the target that any miscalculation could result in fratricide. The margin for error disappeared, replaced by the kind of precision that separated legends from cautionary tales. Valdez programmed the coordinates into her targeting system, watching as her aircraft's computer generated a three-dimensional map of the area. The facility sprawled across 2 square kilometers of coastal terrain, a complex of reinforced concrete buildings connected by underground tunnels. Intelligence photos showed guard towers, vehicle checkpoints, and what appeared to be underground storage facilities. But photographs didn't show the human cost of failure. Razor 7-1, this is Ghost. I have your coordinates. What's your marking method? Ghost will mark with infrared strobes on my command. Be advised, we have wounded and are running low on ammunition. Estimate 4 to 6 minutes before we're overrun. 4 to 6 minutes. In aerial combat, that was simultaneously an eternity and no time at all. Valdez pushed her throttles forward, feeling the familiar pressure as her aircraft accelerated. The Super Hornet's heads-up display showed her ground speed increasing past 500 knots, the Iraqi coastline rushing toward her like an approaching storm. Her electronic warfare suite painted an increasingly hostile picture. Multiple search radars were now active, their beams sweeping the sky in overlapping patterns designed to create an impenetrable detection grid. The Iranians knew someone was coming. They'd been waiting. Ghost, be advised, came the voice from the Hawkeye controller. We're detecting multiple SAM sites going active. Count 4 SA-15 Gauntlet systems and at least 2 SA-20 Gargoyle launchers. Recommend you abort and wait for SCAD support. SCAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. It meant sending specialized aircraft armed with anti-radiation missiles to destroy the SAM sites before attack aircraft moved in. It was the smart play, the safe play, the by-the-book play. It was also a death sentence for the SEALs pinned down below. Valdez looked at her fuel gauge again, then at the digital countdown timer she'd started when Kane made his distress call. 3 minutes, 47 seconds had elapsed. The men on the ground had maybe 2 minutes left before their position became untenable. Phantom Base, this is Ghost. I'm proceeding with the attack run. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 heartbeats. When Major Reeves finally responded, her voice carried the weight of command decisions that could end careers or save lives. Ghost, understand you are proceeding without SCAD support into a high-threat environment. Confirm your intentions. Valdez banked hard left, dropping to 12,000 feet as she approached the Iranian coast. The waters below had turned from purple to gold as dawn painted the sky. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Phantom Base, I have Americans in contact. I'm going in. Ghost, be advised. The SEALs have been classified as expendable for this mission. Do not risk a $30 million aircraft for a tactical extraction. The words hit Valdez like a physical blow. Expendable. 4 letters that reduced human beings to acceptable losses on a spreadsheet. She'd heard the term before, usually in classified briefings where men in suits discuss the mathematics of warfare. But hearing it applied to Kane's team, hearing it spoken aloud while those men fought for their lives, crystallized something in her mind. Phantom Base, say again your last. Ghost RTB, return to base immediately. That's a direct order. Valdez looked down at her hands gripping the flight controls. Her father's ring caught the light from her instrument panel, a simple gold band she'd worn on a chain around her neck since his funeral 3 years ago. Lieutenant Colonel Miguel Valdez had died in Afghanistan, not from enemy fire but from an IED that exploded while he was delivering supplies to a forward operating base. The military had called his death acceptable losses too. Phantom Base, I'm experiencing radio difficulties. Say again your last transmission. It was a lie, and everyone on the frequency knew it. But it was also a declaration of intent. Valdez pushed her throttles to military power, feeling her aircraft surge forward as the twin engines responded. Her radar warning receiver remained quiet, but she knew that was about to change. The Iranian coastline rushed beneath her, a landscape of rocky cliffs and industrial facilities. Smoke rose from several locations, evidence that the SEALs had been busy during their infiltration. But now they were trapped, and conventional wisdom said they weren't worth the risk of losing a Super Hornet and its pilot. Valdez disagreed with conventional wisdom. She armed her weapons systems, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with the authority to deliver violence with surgical precision. Her aircraft carried 4 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, and 6 500-pound JDAM guided bombs. Not a massive payload, but properly employed, enough to change the tactical situation on the ground. Razor 7-1, this is Ghost. I'm 2 minutes out from your position. Light up those strobes when you're ready. Kane's response came immediately. Ghost, negative. We've been ordered to break contact and extract without support. You need to turn around. Razor 7-1, what's your tactical situation? A burst of automatic weapons fire nearly drowned out Kane's reply. We're pinned down in a drainage culvert about 200 meters from the primary structure. Multiple enemy squads maneuvering to flank our position. We've got 1 KIA, 2 wounded. Estimate company strength opposition. Company strength, at least 100 enemy fighters against 8 SEALs. The mathematics were stark and unforgiving. Without air support, Kane's team would be overwhelmed within minutes. Valdez descended to 8,000 feet, low enough that her aircraft's cannon could be effective against ground targets. Her threat warning receiver suddenly erupted in electronic screams as multiple SAM radars achieved lock on her aircraft. The symbols on her display changed from yellow to red, indicating imminent missile launches. Multiple missiles in the air. The Hawkeye controller's voice cracked with tension. Ghost, you have 4 SA-15s tracking. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers. Surface-to-air missiles traveled at 3 times the speed of sound. At her current altitude and range, Valdez had perhaps 15 seconds before impact. She rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, using her aircraft's momentum to build speed while simultaneously deploying chaff and flares. The countermeasures bloomed behind her like metallic fireworks, designed to confuse the missile's guidance systems. The first missile detonated 200 feet to her left, close enough that the shockwave rattled her aircraft and triggered multiple warning lights. The second missile fell for her chaff cloud, exploding harmlessly 1,000 feet behind her position. The third and fourth missiles were still tracking. Valdez pulled out of her dive at 4,000 feet, her aircraft screaming across the Iranian landscape at nearly 600 knots. The terrain below was a blur of brown and gray, punctuated by the geometric patterns of the research facility. She could see muzzle flashes now, tiny sparks of light that marked the positions of enemy fighters. The fourth SAM missile detonated close enough to pepper her aircraft with shrapnel. Valdez felt the Super Hornet shudder as fragments punched through her port wing, but her flight controls remained responsive. She was inside the minimum engagement envelope for the larger SA-20 systems now, too close and too fast for their radar-guided missiles to track effectively. Razor 7-1, mark your position now. 3 infrared strobes appeared on her targeting display, invisible to the naked eye but blazing like searchlights through her aircraft's thermal imaging system. Kane's team was positioned exactly where he'd said, trapped in a concrete drainage channel while enemy fighters closed in from 3 sides. Valdez selected her first JDAM and designated the largest enemy concentration, a group of fighters positioned near what appeared to be a motor pool. The guided bomb would take 45 seconds to reach the target after release, guided by GPS coordinates accurate to within 3 meters. Razor 7-1, danger close, 45 seconds. She pickled off the weapon at 3,000 feet, feeling her aircraft lift slightly as 500 pounds of high explosives separated from her wing pylon. The JDAM fell through the morning air like a predatory bird, its fins adjusting continuously to maintain its programmed course. More SAM radars locked onto her aircraft, but Valdez was already climbing and turning, using the facility's own structures as cover from the missile sites positioned on the perimeter. Her second pass would target the guard towers that provided overwatch of Kane's position. But first, she needed to survive the next 30 seconds. Her radar warning receiver shrieked as 2 more missiles launched from positions she couldn't see. Valdez rolled into another defensive spiral, pulling nearly 7 GS as she maneuvered to defeat the incoming threats. The pressure suit inflated around her legs and torso, preventing blood from pooling and causing her to lose consciousness, but the strain was enormous. The first JDAM detonated exactly on schedule, the explosion visible even from her current altitude as a brilliant flash, followed by a mushrooming cloud of smoke and debris. The motor pool disappeared in the blast, along with the 24 fighters who had been using it for cover. "Good hit, Ghost. Say again, good hit." Kane's voice carried a note of hope for the first time since the radio conversation began. "Estimate 20 to 30 enemy KIA. Remaining forces are pulling back from our immediate vicinity." But Valdez knew the tactical situation remained critical. Destroying one enemy position had bought the SEALs time, nothing more. The compound still bristled with defenders, and reinforcements were undoubtedly en route. The extraction helicopter that was supposed to meet Kane's team would never survive the approach under current conditions. She armed her second JDAM and began her attack run on the guard towers. At 2,000 feet, she was low enough to see individual enemy fighters running between buildings, their movements coordinated and professional. These weren't militia or hastily assembled defenders. They were regular military forces, well-trained and well-equipped. The implications were staggering. If Iranian Revolutionary Guard units were stationed at this facility, it meant the target was far more significant than anyone had briefed. It meant the SEALs had stumbled into something that could trigger a regional war. "Ghost, this is Phantom Base. You are ordered to cease all offensive operations and return to base immediately." Major Reeves' voice carried the authority of rank and regulation, but Valdez was beyond caring about either. She lined up her second bomb run, watching as her targeting system painted a perfect solution on the northernmost guard tower. "Phantom Base, I'm in the middle of a gun run. Request you stand by." Another lie, but a necessary one. Valdez released her second JDAM and immediately began a climbing turn to avoid the multiple missile systems that were tracking her aircraft. Her threat warning receiver had become a constant electronic scream, indicating that every SAM system within 50 miles was trying to kill her. She deployed more chaff and flares, the countermeasures streaming behind her aircraft like a metallic comet tail. 2 more missiles detonated close enough to rattle her fillings, but her Super Hornet continued to respond to her inputs. The aircraft was taking damage. She could feel it in the slight sluggishness of the controls, but it was still flying. The second JDAM found its target, the explosion toppling the guard tower and eliminating the heavy machine gun position that had been raking Kane's location with suppressive fire. Secondary explosions indicated ammunition storage, the fireworks display visible for miles as tracer rounds and small munitions cooked off in the inferno. "Outstanding, Ghost. You've broken their overwatch capability. We're preparing to move to the extraction point." But Valdez could see what Kane couldn't from his position in the drainage culvert. Enemy reinforcements were arriving from the south, at least 2 companies of mechanized infantry in armored personnel carriers. Her 2 JDAMs had eliminated immediate threats, but the larger tactical picture remained grim. She selected her 20 cannon and descended for a strafing run, her aircraft's targeting computer automatically calculating the lead angle required to hit moving vehicles. The M61, a 1 Vulcan cannon, could fire 6,000 rounds per minute, each tungsten-cored projectile capable of punching through light armor at close range. At 1,000 feet, Valdez opened fire. The cannon's distinctive buzzsaw sound filled her cockpit as 20 rounds chewed through the lead APC, the vehicle erupting in flames as its fuel tank exploded. She walked her fire across the convoy, watching through her targeting pod as enemy vehicles scattered in all directions. Her cannon fell silent after a 3-second burst, 570 rounds expended. She pulled up hard to avoid ground fire, feeling her aircraft strain under the G-forces. Warning lights illuminated across her instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure was falling in one system. She had multiple holes in her port wing, and her fuel consumption rate had increased dramatically. Ghost, be advised. Extraction helicopter is inbound your location. ETA 12 minutes to the pickup zone. 12 minutes. Valdez looked at her fuel gauge and quickly calculated her remaining flying time. At current consumption rates, she had perhaps 15 minutes of fuel remaining, enough to reach the extraction point, but not enough to return to base without aerial refueling. Razor 7-1, what's your status? Kane's reply came between bursts of small arms fire. We're moving to the extraction point now. Estimate 8 minutes to reach the LZ. Be advised, we're carrying 2 wounded and the package. The package, whatever the SEALs had infiltrated the facility to steal, was important enough to risk 8 lives retrieving it. Valdez suspected it was either intelligence documents or a high-value person, but the specifics didn't matter. Her job was to keep Kane's team alive long enough for extraction. She climbed to 5,000 feet and assessed the tactical situation through her targeting pod. Enemy forces were regrouping after her strafing attack, but they were also bringing up more sophisticated air defense systems. She could see tracked vehicles that looked suspiciously like SA-6 launchers moving into position around the extraction landing zone. Ghost, this is Warhawk 7-7. A new voice on the radio, calm and professional. The extraction helicopter was call sign Warhawk, probably an MH-60 Seahawk flown by Navy Special Operations Aviation. I'm 20 minutes out from the pickup zone. Request tactical situation update. Warhawk 7-7, this is Ghost. The LZ is currently under observation by enemy forces with suspected SAM coverage. Recommend you coordinate with Razor for an alternate extraction site. Negative, Ghost. Primary LZ is the only location with suitable terrain for landing. We'll need you to suppress air defenses during our approach. Suppress air defenses. With what? Valdez had expended her 2 heaviest weapons and burned through most of her cannon ammunition. She had 4 air-to-air missiles remaining, but they were designed to engage aircraft, not ground-based SAM systems. Unless she got creative. The AIM-120 AMRAAM was a sophisticated missile with its own active radar seeker. In theory, it could engage any target that presented a suitable radar signature, including the large phased array antennas used by advanced SAM systems. It wasn't a recommended employment method. Using a $40,000 air-to-air missile against ground targets was the kind of improvisation that ended military careers. But careers were less important than lives. Valdez selected one of her AMRAAMs and began hunting for the SA-6 launcher she'd spotted earlier. Her aircraft's radar painted the area where the system should be positioned, but the launcher itself was mobile and had likely relocated since her last observation. Razor 7-1, I need eyes on any air defense systems near the extraction point. Can you provide laser designation? Stand by, Ghost. Kane's voice was tight with concentration. We have visual on what appears to be a tracked SAM launcher bearing 270 from the LZ. Range approximately 800 meters. Can you laze the target? Affirmative, laser on. Valdez's targeting pod immediately acquired the laser designation, a pinpoint of infrared energy invisible to the naked eye, but blazing like a beacon through her aircraft's sensors. The target appeared on her display as a tracked vehicle with what looked like a large rotating antenna, definitely an SA-6 gainful system, capable of engaging aircraft at ranges up to 30 kilometers. She fired her first AMRAAM, watching as the missile separated from her aircraft and began its autonomous flight toward the designated target. The AIM-120 wasn't designed for this kind of engagement, but its sophisticated guidance system would adapt to whatever target it found at the laser designation point. Missile away, 40 seconds to impact. Valdez used the time to reposition her aircraft and search for additional threats. Her radar warning receiver indicated at least 3 more SAM systems in the area, but they were maintaining electronic silence to avoid detection. The Iranians were learning to adapt to her tactics. The AMRAAM detonated exactly on schedule, its high-explosive warhead designed to destroy aircraft, but equally effective against the delicate electronics of a radar system. The SA-6 launcher disappeared in a fireball that climbed 300 feet into the morning sky. Good hit, Ghost, target destroyed. We're 2 minutes out from the LZ. But Valdez could see more problems developing. Enemy infantry was moving to surround the extraction point, and her fuel state was becoming critical. She had enough aviation gas for perhaps one more attack run before she'd be forced to abandon the area. She selected her remaining cannon ammunition, maybe 200 rounds, and descended for another strafing attack. This time her target was the infantry positions that threatened to overrun Kane's team during the vulnerable moments of helicopter extraction. At 1,500 feet, she opened fire. The cannon's buzz was shorter this time, the weapon cycling dry after a brief burst. But the psychological effect on the enemy infantry was dramatic. Soldiers scattered in all directions, abandoning their advance toward the landing zone. Razor 7-1, you should have clear approach lanes for the next few minutes. Copy, Ghost, we're in position at the LZ now. Where's our ride? As if summoned by Kane's question, the MH-60 Seahawk appeared on the horizon, flying low and fast toward the extraction point. The helicopter was configured for special operations, its fuselage bristling with defensive systems and carrying external fuel tanks for extended-range missions. Warhawk 7-7, this is Ghost. You have clear approach lanes but expect enemy reaction within the next 2 to 3 minutes. Recommend minimum time on the ground. Roger, Ghost will be fast.